Music and drama go together like peanut butter and jelly. There's bands out there that exist for the sole reason of drama. Want an example? However, sometimes beefs happen for no logical rhyme or reason, and it leaves us as viewers scratching our heads and asking what the point of that was. So today, let's check out some of the most bewildering band beefs to see who can leave us the most flabbergasted. I don't got any rules for this, just as long as no one gets hurt or dies or something. The pettier the better, so it's only appropriate we start with Billy Corgan. First, we got Billy Corgan versus Anderson Cooper, and despite the countless beefs, fights, and backhanded comments Billy's made about others, this one actually wasn't started by him. Back in 2014, Anderson Cooper had a segment on his show called The Ridiculist, where he made fun of things he considered ridiculous.
On the show The Doctors, Coco got an ultrasound on her butt.
This feels like he's trying way too hard to be like Jon Stewart in The Daily Show, except way less funny. But he did an episode about Billy ragging on a furniture ad he made with his wrestling organization, and when he was on the cover of an animal shelter magazine called Paws.
So perhaps Billy Corgan is, I don't know, offers alternative rocker, but I think maybe there's more to this. Maybe he's being ironic, or maybe when the cool rock stars start doing less rock starry things, kind of makes us face our own mortality. Maybe the internet is the real problem here. There was a time that nobody outside of Chicago would have ever seen the cover of Paws Chicago magazine.
I know Billy can be a jerk, like there's literal compilations of him being a dick on YouTube. But what the hell is Anderson Cooper's problem? He's being so mean for no reason. God forbid a musician do something other than music. Not to mention too, this wasn't just some rando publicity stunt Billy did for attention. In 2013, he raised over $140,000 for Paws, and even more from that furniture ad. So you can tell this was a cause Billy actually cared about. Paws even fired back at Anderson in their next volume's cover. If this stopped right here, Billy easily would have came out on top and actually looked like the good guy for once. Unfortunately, he wasn't gonna let this slide. He made some main character-ass speeches about Cooper being an evil corporate shill and having no integrity, and even sold shirts at Smashing Pumpkin shows that said "fuck Anderson Cooper" on it, with two cats that looked genuinely upset being there. If anyone has one of these shirts, please, please, please send me a picture of it. Now, naturally, this is where the beef should have ended, and to be honest, it did. Like, Anderson didn't say anything in response to this, but Billy would still talk about this till like 2017. Again, Anderson was being a dick, but is it really worth stressing about over 3 years later? Though, knowing Billy, I'm sure it's still eating at him to this day. I wouldn't be shocked if he dedicated an entire episode of his podcast to this. Final verdict, Anderson was too nasty, but Billy didn't know when to shut up. I'm just glad he doesn't do the ridiculous anymore. I think the glass has humbled him. So one of these days, I want to make a huge-ass video about how Tom Morello is one of the biggest losers of all time, and in a lot of ways has become the very machine he swore to rage against. Let this story be kind of a sneak peek of that. So once again in 2014, Tom finished playing a solo show in Seattle, and went out with some friends to a restaurant called the 5 Point Cafe. This place is actually pretty famous in the Seattle area, like they've had people like Sinbad go there before. So if you can imagine, this place is usually poppin', which was exactly the case when Tom and his posse got there. The door guy wouldn't let him in because they were at full capacity, which made him have a little hissy fit and went to Twitter saying they were super rude and apparently anti-worker. So the owner of the 5 Point, David Maynard, responded to Tom with one of the best ass blastings of all time. He not only said the 5 Point pays higher than most smaller restaurants, offers health insurance, paid sick days, paid time off, and retirement and profit share. David also worked to raise the minimum wage, for paid sick day laws, and a city-sponsored retirement plan for employees in Seattle. So not only is the 5 Point extremely anti-worker, he also said Tom and his friends were being dicks, which I'm sure we can all believe in a heartbeat. If Tom gave up now and accepted he was being a tool, he would have saved himself a lot of embarrassment. Too bad he didn't do that, because a few days later he responded with the definition of a wall of text. Half of it's him trying to get sympathy for supporting 15 Now. This was a movement at the time in Seattle to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Tom's solo show before all this went down was actually in support of it, so it seemed like he actually cared about this issue. But then he says he willingly went to the 5 Point even though one of his friends told him the owner was against the 15 Now movement. You'd think someone as morally righteous as Tom Morello wouldn't support something that goes against something he believes in, but as he says, they were hungry, so they gave it a shot. And to further prove how little Tom actually cares about this shit, he says they went to IHOP after getting rejected. You'd think too he would be against supporting a post-capitalistic conglomerate cesspool chain restaurant. Yeah, I'm sure they're definitely supporting 15 now too. He also recounts his encounter with the doorman and makes himself look way more reasonable. But in this sentence, he admits to asking for the manager and trying to worm his way in by being part of Rage. So he simultaneously had a "do you know who I am" moment and a Karen moment. He also accused the doorman of being anti-Kenyan, because Tom's brother, who was in the party, was visiting from Kenya at the time. And I'm not gonna say anything snarky about that, just no. And I say that because I found an interview with the doorman himself, Eric Roach, as he confirms what we knew this entire time, the 5 Point was literally too busy to let them in. In fact, according to Roach, they were even busier than usual because of a music festival, and they only had one bartender and one server that night. So on top of being at capacity, there were only 2 people front of house. He also believed Tom had a secret agenda being there because of the owner's stance on 15 now. That does check out with what he said in the wall of text, but that's giving Tom's morals way too much credit. They're basically made out of clay. Personally, I think Tom lied about what his friends said in the post and only learned about the owner's stance after all this went down. Because a day before that wall of text, he tweeted saying he was willing to forgive the 5 Point if the owner embraced 15 now, effectively weaponizing the very thing he said he cared about. After this, the beef died and Tom went to be annoying elsewhere. I am curious if the 5 Point ever brags about this though. They rightfully deserve to. Final verdict, Tom is a loser and doesn't care about what he preaches. Next, we got the saga that was the Elton John and Madonna beef. This one just got squashed a couple months ago, so now seems like the perfect time to talk about it. It all started during the Q Awards in 2004. Elton won Best Classical Songwriter that year, and during his acceptance speech, he put Madonna on blast, accusing her of lip-syncing, as she was also nominated for Best Live Act that year too.
Madonna, best fucking live act. Fuck off. Sorry about that, but I think everyone who lip syncs in public on stage when you pay like 75 quid to see them should be shot. Thank you very much.
Now, I despise lip syncing as much as the next guy, but was that really necessary? Especially when you consider she didn't even win the category. Muse did. They definitely deserved it more, but the fact she didn't win makes this way more petty. A month later, Elton was interviewed about the incident and said he was at a point in his life where he needed to be the most true to himself, which means if he's gotta call people out at award shows, then by God, he's gonna do it. He had some regret targeting Madonna since they were kind of friends before this, and acknowledge there's artists that are way worse with lip syncing compared to her, even though he does kind of backpedal on this in the literal next sentence. Really, again, it just came down to the nomination since she was up against newer bands at the time like Muse and The Darkness. I get where he's coming from with that since, you know, you want to see these guys get the respect they deserve, but again, they did. Muse won, Madonna didn't. It's worth noting too, this wasn't the first time Elton took shots at Madonna. Back in 2002, he called her song Die Another Day for the James Bond movie of the same name the worst Bond theme of all time, saying that he or Lulu, who sang on Man with a Golden Gun, should have done it. Things would simmer down for the next couple years until 2012, when they were both nominated for Best Original Song for a Motion Picture at the Golden Globes. The two, of course, had some things to say about each other on the red carpet.
Elton John was just here.
Was he?
Yes, and he had...
Wearing the green dress?
No, he's not, but he had a choice word for you about the category that he's up against you. He said you don't have an effing chance.
But then came the actual awards, and surprise, surprise, Madonna won. And side note, I'm not the biggest fan of her, but thank God Hello Hello didn't win. That song is terrible, and Romeo and Juliet sucks ass. Elton, of course, wasn't happy about this. The camera even cuts to his emotionless face during her acceptance speech. But you know who else wasn't happy? Elton's husband, David Furnish. After the ceremony, he took to Facebook to vent his frustrations. And look, I've never been one for awards when it comes to music and just like art in general. I know I'm in the minority on that, as a lot of people do care about that shit, but even Madonna kind of felt the same. After the ceremony, she was interviewed backstage saying how she still respects Elton and he'll win more awards in the future. I'm sure she was still upset about the whole thing, but it seems like she wasn't getting nasty about it. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for Elton. A few weeks later, he was asked about Madonna performing at that year's Super Bowl halftime show, to which he said,
"Make sure you lip sync good."
Then in August, he said she looked like a fairground stripper, among other things, in another interview. This was also fueled by drama Madonna started with Lady Gaga after accusing Born This Way to be a ripoff of her song Express Yourself from the 80s. It's worth knowing that Elton and Lady Gaga are super tight. In fact, she's the godmother to one of his kids, so that definitely made Elton dislike her more. But as the 2020s rolled around, things started to simmer down. In 2023, Elton made an Instagram post praising Madonna for an AIDS tribute she did kid during a tour. She's actually been a strong advocate for HIV research since the 80s, and Elton of course started his AIDS Foundation in '92. So this was something they were both extremely passionate about and would begin to slowly squash the beef. Then finally, in April of this year, Madonna made an Instagram post with the two of them officially declaring the hatchet was buried. She went into more detail about her side of the story, how she admired Elton since she was a teenager, and how much it hurt knowing he was super public about disliking her. But after confronting him on SNL, the two made up within minutes, and even talked about collaborating. So for once, we got a happy ending. I think overall, Elton was way more of a dick, and Madonna was at most an agitator, but at least everyone's happy. To wrap this up, let's talk about a somewhat recent beef that I'm sure a lot of you already know about, but it's just too ridiculous not to bring up. This wasn't a beef with another band, but instead, boomers. On November 2024, Knocked Loose by some divine intervention was booked as the musical guest on Jimmy Kimmel. I say that because they're a hardcore band. A hardcore of what? Y'all can fight about that in the comments. But their style is way heavier than any other musical act late shows would typically book. I mean, like, closest thing you'll get is like Metallica, but, you know, they're them, so. Though credit where credit's due, Kimmel's had bands like Asking Alexandria on before, so this wasn't too out of the norm for him. But because he got a loud and angry-ass band playing, the crowd is gonna act accordingly and go ballistic. Like, I never thought I'd see moshing, crowd surfing, headbanging, and a circle on Jimmy Kimmel. And it doesn't stop there. Halfway in, Poppy comes out and screams like crazy with a bunch of pyrotechnics going off and the rain falling. This shit is so badass, it is beyond words. And it's funny, this gives me flashbacks to the time Fear was the musical guest on SNL. Seeing people slam dancing on these professional film sets with angry-ass music playing. But this wasn't a complete disaster that got them banned off a show. In fact, it went perfectly. A little too perfectly. See, this music and culture isn't something your typical Jimmy Kimmel fan is ever exposed to. Do you think these people know what a mosh pit is? No, of course not. They live in gated communities. And so old people did the one thing they do in times of peril, make a Facebook post. On the performance's upload, hundreds of angry boomers left comments saying how they were horrified and this doesn't constitute as music, and their kids were crying from the guitar shredding. Man, if your kid is scared of guitar, you failed as a parent. But it wasn't just these soft-ass boomers going after Knocked Loose. You also had just as many music elitists giving them shit too, saying how there's tons of better hardcore bands that could have played instead and their vocalist sucks. Like I said in a previous video, I've yet to go through a metal phase, so I acknowledge I'm an outsider looking in with this stuff, but why do these metalcore fans, hardcore fans, whatever it is, why do they have to be so pretentious about their own music? Can't you guys be happy this genre is getting represented in the first place? In fact, that's what tons of other comments said too. Even other metalcore bands were praising the performance. Finally, after enough people voiced their complaints, Knocked Loose's singer Brian Garris posted a response on Instagram. He said it was their goal to squeeze the band into places it doesn't belong, and by going on national television, it's opened up a new world of possibilities for everyone in the genre. And being honest, he's completely right, because again, for the longest time, bands like this would rarely ever play on TV. But now that's starting to change, because you know who Kimmel just had on recently? Spirit Box, another band I'm sure boomers are horrified of too. So in the end, even though Knocked Loose got a lot of unnecessary shit thrown at them, at least they made history and gave us some of the funniest Facebook comments of all time. Alright, that's enough beefing for one day. As always, thank you all very much for watching. I hope this video gave you an insight on how ridiculous these dramas can get, especially that Billy Corgan one. For real, this video could have been solely about him and the endless beefs he started for no reason. I'm probably gonna make a follow-up to this in a couple months, so I'd love to hear what y'all's favorite bewildering band beefs are in the comments. Shoutouts, of course, to my patrons, and I'll see y'all next time to discuss the band I fell out of love with. See you then.